So Green Energy Consumers, we've been around for more than 40 years. And we're very consumer focused. We're a nonprofit, and we're all about the speeding the just transition to a zero carbon economy. As I said, we're a consumer focused organization, and we're very focused on this big transition of moving our heating systems away from fossil fuel combustion to systems that don't create greenhouse gases, or that create less greenhouse gases. We want to help you as energy consumers find trusted vendors and sound advice. We're part of that sound advice, but there are many more resources that we can refer you to as well. And we want to push the whole heat pump industry to be better by educating consumers. And you can find a lot of information on our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/heat pumps. So what is a heat pump? It's the same technology as an air conditioner or a refrigerator. You already have at least a refrigerator in your home. And as it says in the word, refrigerant is the key operative in all of these systems. It's a highly temperature sensitive fluid or gas, depending on which stage it's in, what temperature it's at. It can absorb heat out of -50 degrees and can compress that and generate heat, up to 120 degrees. So it's a really amazing substance, that refrigerant liquid. And with a heat pump, it's like a refrigerator that can run in reverse, or an air conditioner that can run in reverse. It can take heat out of your house, or it can put heat into your house. And it's just like just like these water pumps, in that a water pump does not create water. It's merely moving water from one place to another. There's a little pump that's moving it from one place to another, capturing it and moving it. And that's what a heat pump does. It captures the heat in that refrigerant, liquid or gas. It pumps that refrigerant to another place, and then allows the heat to go out in the other place. So you may have heard heat pumps are not efficient down to very cold temperatures. That was true in the past, and it is not true in the present. As of 10, 15 years ago, there was development, well, 15 or 20 years ago now, there was development of cold climate heat pump technology. And these are designed to efficiently produce heat down to -15 degrees. They come in a lot of different forms. They can be ducted or ductless. You see a ductless unit here in this illustration. It can be whole home or partial home. It can be taking heat out of the air, an air source heat pump, or out of the ground, a ground source heat pump. Let's look at the most common configuration, and that's the ductless mini splits, or the ductless units. The most common is this wall hung unit. It's relatively high up on the wall. That allows it to distribute air easily without any furniture blocking the way. It's easy for the installers to get to. Obviously in summer, it's dropping cool air so that it mixes easily. There's also floor mounted units that look like this, or they could be flush against the floor. These are great, especially for first floor heating and cooling. And the refrigerant line for these can come in through your basement. So you can put them in the middle of the home. These wall mounted units are almost always going to be on an exterior wall. There are ceiling mounted units as well, ceiling cassettes. They can be square like this one. They can be rectangular. Most often those are installed from an attic level down below, but occasionally they can be put from below. They can be inserted from below. Now the outdoor condensers look like a big suitcase. They need to be somewhere where there's going to be a lot of airflow. You can't put it, right up against, two things, whatever. They need to be up off the ground, because in the winter, you can't have ice building up around this, because the ice would restrict the airflow. There will be a line that connects the electricity, and that also transports the refrigerant from inside the outdoor unit to the inside where the indoor head or air handler is located. Now, why are there big incentives for heat pumps? It's because of the greenhouse gases. This is a 2021 data set from the Mass Clean Energy Center, but it shows you a nice comparison of the greenhouse gases from all the fossil fuels and from traditional electric baseboard compared to air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. So many fewer greenhouse gases being generated by these sources. And as the electric grid becomes 100% clean electricity, which it is mandated to do in Massachusetts by 2050, there will be zero greenhouse gases associated with heating through heat pumps. Well, if you were still burning oil, propane, or natural gas, you would still be creating all these greenhouse gases. So that's why there's big incentives. And that's why we care about it. So diving deeper into the costs and incentives, there are two costs that we're going to look at. The first is your upfront costs, your installation costs, purchase and installation, and the second is your operating cost. But let's first look at the installation costs. So a very rough ballpark, and again, every house is different. You need to have a technician come out to your house to actually find out how much your house, a heat pump in your home would cost to meet your needs. If you were going to put in a single head ductless system, you'd be looking at $6,000 to $10,000 after incentives. If you were looking at creating your whole home heated by heat pumps, you'd be looking at $15,000 to $25,000, possibly even more if you have big cathedral ceilings or many bedrooms, etc. Now, in addition to that cost, a lot of homes need to upgrade their electrical service. We're telling people at present that 200 amp electrical service is likely what you're going to need. I've seen some quotes for that upgrade between 6,500 to 9,000 for a service upgrade. So you do need to factor that in. And there are a couple loan programs that can help with installation costs. One is the heat loan through Mass Save. That is currently up to $50,000 if you're installing a heat pump. It may be reduced to $25,000 in the coming year or years. The Mass Save funding is allocated in 3-year chunks, and we're at the end of one 3-year chunk. We're in 2025, we'll start the next 3-year chunk. And the plans for that 2025 program have the 2025 through 2027 program have not yet been firmed up. So you'll see me referencing a lot of these tentative changes. These are all proposed changes, but they haven't yet been confirmed by the Department of Public Utilities, which will do so in January, I believe. There's a second new loan program. It's a low interest loan. I think all the loans max out at 2% or something like that. It's through the Mass Community Climate Bank, and it's up to $100,000. This is for moderate income homes, which is defined as, I think, 165,000 annual income. But you can get more information. And we will be sharing a copy of these slides for everyone, so you'll be able to click through. Now, to offset those installation costs, there is a generous federal tax credit of up to $2,000 per year for a heat pump installation or a heat pump hot water heater. This is a post incentive. It's 30% up to $2,000. There's also a smaller incentive, a smaller credit for the electrical upgrade. You can claim up to $3,200 per year, a combination of these things, but you can't claim the $2,000 for a heat pump and $2,000 for a heat pump water heater in the same year. There is no rollover. So say, 30% of your post incentive costs would be $6,000. You can't take 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. You can just do it once for that piece of equipment. But you can claim a new energy saving tax credit for a new piece of equipment every year for 10 years. So you can do heat pumps one year, heat pump water heaters the next year, et cetera, on down the line, your induction cooling, all sorts of things. And I do have a link here to the IRS website that describes these. Now, you may have heard about the federally funded rebates, the Inflation Reduction rebates. They haven't yet been rolled out in Massachusetts. Each state is being approved by the federal government as they finish their proposals, et cetera. So we expect in 2025 that something will be announced for Massachusetts. There are going to be two basic types. One is for all income levels, and it uses the acronym PER, and it's going to be based on projected energy savings. So working with an energy modeler to say, we're going to do all these different things, and it's going to reduce the home's total savings, total energy use by 60%, something like that. Pardon me. And the second of the federally funded rebates that we expect to have in Massachusetts is the HERE rebate, home electrification and appliance rebate. That is restricted to low and moderate income households, but it's up to 150% of area median income. In the Metro Boston area, 150% of area median income for a 3-person household is about $200,000. So you can see it's a fairly generous definition of moderate income. And this will be based on specific measures. So heat pump is one measure, a heat pump water heater is another, an induction stove is another. The electrification actually has its own measure as well. And you can get up to 14,000 in 1 year if you're installing all of these things. Again, depending on your income level, the incentives are higher for low income than they are for moderate income under this program. You can get updates from the Department of Energy Resources on the rollout of the program if you sign up at the link that I provided in the slides. Now, the state incentives vary based on household income and where you live. So I'm going to give an example of a 2-person household in Cambridge, and there are 3 levels applicable in Massachusetts now: low income, moderate income, and market rate. The low income for this location and a 2-person household is $59,360, and for households that meet that qualification, ABCD would completely cover the cost of the heat pump installation. Now, moderate income starts at that $59,360 and goes up to $104,200. And that is considered an enhanced incentive by Mass Save of $16,000 per apartment or home. So if you have a 2-apartment home, that could be $16,000 per apartment, so $32,000 total. There's also a pilot project for the moderate income homes in Plymouth, Brockton, and Springfield that will cover 100% of the cost for that moderate income group. And if your income is in Cambridge, if your income is above $104,200, then you're considered market rate. And at present, the Mass Save incentive is $10,000 per apartment or home. So again, if you owned a triple decker in Cambridge, you get $30,000 if you converted all 3 units. This may be lower in 2025. This is one of the things that's proposed to be changed. So the whole home definition is you are completely replacing your fossil fuel heating. The fossil fuel system doesn't have to be removed, but it has to be disconnected. So your thermostat can't be connected to your furnace any longer. You can't turn it on with a thermostat. And at present, as I said, it's $10,000 for a home. That may be reduced to $3,000 per ton of heating capacity. The average home might use 2 or 3 tons of heat. So that may be reduced to 6,000 to 9,000 per home. You do need to get a home energy assessment first, and you do need to weatherize if they find that there's some place in your home that could use more insulation. You have to add that insulation before you would qualify for this vote. You can also do a heat pump with a fossil fuel backup. You can keep your fossil fuel system running. But the incentive is a little bit less. It's reduced to $1,250 per ton. And there may be a total cap of $2,000 per home starting in 2025. And again, most homes might need 3 tons. A large home might need up to 5 tons. In these situations where you have a working fossil fuel system and a whole home heat pump system, you would have a thermostat that's called an integrated control. It's basically a smart thermostat that is connected to both systems, can turn on and off both systems. And a technician sets a switchover point in consultation with you, but advised by the program that there may be a specific number that they need to set it at, say 30 degrees. And in that instance, you've got a nice fall day, and the heat pump's been working all during the day, and it gets to be 10 p.m. and it goes below 30 degrees. The heat pump will be switched off, the fossil fuel system will come on, and then it switches back when it warms up the next day and gets to 30 degrees again. So that's what a partial system looks like. Of course, you can also have a partial system where you've got, say, a great moon or a sun moon, and you've got a heat pump in that space, but the fossil fuel system heats the rest of the home. That's also another option. I'll just mention briefly that there are ground source systems and there are air to water systems. These are both less common. The ground source, or also known as geothermal, there is a good rebate for that, $15,000. It's larger because the installation work is more expensive because you need to actually get a well drigger or a backhoe onto your property to lay the refrigerant line in the ground itself. They are more efficient than an air source one. So if you do have the space for it, it's a good thing to consider because it will save you on your operating cost. And there are air to water heat pumps. Again, they are less common. There is a rebate for that as well, similar to the air source heat pumps. These are most applicable for radiant flooring or for homes that where you're able to add a lot of insulation so that the amount of heat that's needed in the house has been reduced from the last time you bought a boiler. The boiler can put out really hot water, and the heat pump can't reach that temperature. So your radiators will never get as hot as they were getting with your boiler if you switched over. There's also no simple one-for-one replacement at present. Now, there is good news on the horizon with air-to-water hydronic heat pumps. New York State Energy Efficiency Program has just put in a purchase order for these systems, which will make them more cost competitive on the market and will boost production capacity. But at present, there are very few installers that are experienced with hydronic heat pumps in Massachusetts. If you want to pursue that route now, you would be a pioneer, and I would salute you for doing that. And I would love to hear from you about your experience so that I can learn to help others. Of course, most of the people on this call, or the majority of the people on this call, use hydronic heating. So this is applicable. I'm going to touch on more about this in just a few minutes about how to consider switching to heat pumps, even if you have now a boiler. We'll first touch on heat pump water heaters. A lot of people, or some people, heat their hot water, their domestic hot water for showers and dishwasher, etc., with their boiler. If you do that, you will need to think, and if you're replacing the boiler, then you need to think about also replacing your water heating system. There is the heat pump water heaters, sometimes called hybrids. There is a rebate for that. They are 2 to 3 times more efficient than any of the other tank options. They do need adequate space for air exchange. You can't put these in a small utility closet because they need to be able to grab heat from a large space to be able to concentrate that heat into the hot water, give you adequate hot water. They do at present need a dedicated electrical circuit. There are plug-in varieties, but they're not popular yet. They're not really marketed here in New England, where our intake water is so cold. The economics, the operating costs of that unit get to be pretty stressful. It does need a condensate drain because as it grabs the heat out of the water, it's also going to condense water vapor that's been held in that warmer area will drop out. So that needs someplace to drain. And if it can't drain into a floor drain, then it needs to be pumped to a sink drain or whatever. It will make that space colder and drier. Drier is great for a lot of basements. Colder may not be a problem at all if you don't have any heated space in your basement, but if you do have heated space in your basement, then you need to think about how to not Peter to pay Paul on stealing heat from the heated space. There is a good heat pump water heater cost calculator on the Efficiency Maine website, and I recommend that you use that to think about what your operating costs would be. Now let's look at the operating costs of a heat pump. There's several factors, and I first want to orient you to the weather, which is one of 3 factors. There's weather, there's efficiency, and there's the fuel cost. There are the 3 things that we'll look at. So first, looking at weather. This is 10 years of heating season data from New England. This is the temperature, and this is the hours of the heating season that you are at that temperature. So we have roughly 2,000 hours at 60. We have roughly, 2,500 at 32. So you see the majority of the winter, you're in that 30 to 60 degree range. And then say, 20 to 30% of the winter, you're in colder temperatures. And this is important because, as I mentioned, the cold climate heat pumps are designed to work efficiently down to -15, or depending on the piece of equipment, could be -10 or -5. But if you don't get the right equipment, then it really struggles to produce heat at this colder temperature, and you really want to make sure you get a cold climate heat pump, one that has high efficiency. Now this is a complicated chart, so we'll just take a few minutes looking at it. Again, we have the same weather data, that's the gray screen here, but we've added different fuel types. Purple for propane, black for oil, blue for gas, and green for air source heat pump. And you see for the majority of the winter, the air source heat pump is going to be the most cost-effective of these 3 options. But as we get into the colder temperatures, gas can be more efficient, and in the really cold temperatures, oil, even propane can be as efficient. Now, each home is different, and each home's electricity and gas and propane and oil prices are going to be different. So I want to be transparent about the assumptions that I've built into this chart, because as they say in the car ads, your mileage may differ. So in this chart, we're using $3.51 for the price of propane, $4.01 for the price of oil, 32 cents for the price of electricity. That's supply and delivery costs, and $2.25 per therm for natural gas. So what you want to do is think about your own, what you are paying for these things, and then you can adjust in your mind what your cost benefit might be on these things. I've also made clear this is the efficiency of the equipment that we've assumed for the air source heat pump. At 60 degrees, it's the coefficient of performance, COP, that's a measure of efficiency for heat pumps, is 4.71. That means for each 1 kilowatt of electricity you put into this particular heat pump, you're going to get 4.75 kilowatts of heat out of it. So it's a tremendously efficient system. That's why it's so cost effective at these higher temperatures. It's, still that efficient at 47. At 17, it's dropped down to 2.22. At minus 15, it's at 1.95. This 1.95 is still a great efficiency number. If you think of a natural gas furnace, the highest that you're going to get is about 98%. So in this metric, it would be 0.98. So the heat pump is still twice as efficient in terms of its optimization of fuel, even at this very cold temperature. That's why this is classified as a cold climate heat pump. And this is the too long didn't read graph here. Propane is clearly the most expensive. This is dollars per year needed to keep your home warm. Oil is less, next costly. In this particular instance, the heat pump is going to be slightly more costly than the natural gas. I know the majority of you are heating with gas, so we say to propane and oil heated customers, yes, a heat pump is likely going to save you money on its operating costs. We say to gas company customers, you really need to look at what you're paying for electricity, what you're paying for gas, and then you need to think about 10 years out what those are likely to be, and then make your choice. So just jumping forward to design options. I know that was a lot. So let's refinish. Let's think again about your particular home. Does your home have ductwork or does it not have ductwork? So if you don't have, if you have ductwork, you have a furnace, not a boiler. You've got, grates in the floor, well, and hot air. This hot air ductwork is relatively easy to reuse for a heat pump. You'd have a heat pump condenser outside, you'd have an air handler in your basement using that same ductwork. Of course, you need to make sure that the ductwork is in good condition and that it can handle cold air as well as hot air. If you have central air conditioning and you have that central air ductwork, you may be able to use that for a heat pump. Again, somebody needs to look at the ductwork, the size, the configuration to decide, is that ductwork that's currently sized for cold air, is it also compatible for hot air? But if you can do that, then it's really great because you'd be replacing two pieces of equipment, your central air conditioning and your furnace with one. So your replacement costs are going to be lower over time. Now, if your home lacks ductwork, you don't have a furnace, you have a boiler, and you don't have central air conditioning. Remember, heat pumps, there's not an easy drop-in replacement for your boiler because the heat pumps don't produce water that is hot enough to match the heat that's currently produced by your boilers. Again, if you're able to super insulate your home compared to, or greatly increase your insulation compared to when you last bought your boiler, that lower temperature may work for you. I definitely have talked with people who've been able to replace their boiler with a heat pump because they've added so much insulation and they don't need those radiators to get up as hot or their baseboard to get as hot as it used to get with the boiler. There are more hydronic options, as I mentioned, coming in 2025. we have been told. And again, you could go with a ductless or a mini ducted system. We'll talk about mini ducted systems in just a minute. But you could, still have, you can leave your radiators in place, you can leave your baseboard in place, and you could install ductless units. You could have a single head serving a large open area like a great room. You could have single zones or multi-zones, and a mini ducted unit could serve several small adjacent rooms, say an office and a bedroom, or three little bedrooms on the second floor, etc. Always remember to insulate first. That's going to make a huge difference in your cost, both the installation cost and the operating cost. So let's look specifically at sizing your system, because one thing we want to warn you against is oversizing. This has been one of the major concerns that we've seen come up in people who've installed so far. I'm going to show you 3 slides with this same illustration of a home. This is a 2-bedroom home, and we have posited that the heat load, the amount of heat that's needed to keep the home warm on the coldest night of the winter, is 24,000 BTUs of heat per hour. A BTU is a British thermal unit. So 24,000. And in this illustration, we've put 24,000 head in the living room, dining room, kitchen area. And that would provide enough to keep the whole house from freezing. It would be similar to having a wood stove, your home heated by a wood stove or pellet stove in the living room, where your bedrooms would be cooler in winter, and they would be warmer in summer. This may be absolutely fine for you. You could put ceiling fans in those bedrooms and you could be completely comfortable. This could also be an opportunity for a partial displacement of heat, particularly if you move the thermostat down the hall or put it in the back bedroom and set it lower than the setting on the heat pump. Now, this is the one we want to warn you about. A contractor comes in and says, oh, your heat load is 24,000, but you need a head in every room. And so I'm going to put in 4 heads, and I'm going to put in the 9,000 BTU units. And it's fine that that's going to give you a max capacity of 26,000, because they'll just run less, and that'll be fine. But the problem is with so you've got now a third more than what you need in terms of the BTUs being produced. And heat pump systems are designed to run continuously, not on, off, on, off. When they go on, off, they're inefficient. And most importantly, in summer, you're going to end up with cold and clammy air. It's going to be cold, and then the systems are going to shut down, but the dehumidification cycle takes longer than the cooling cycle. And so the air will not be dehumidified, but it will be cold. So it's going to be more expensive to purchase because you're buying more equipment than you need. It's going to be more expensive to operate, and the comfort level is not going to be there. So avoid oversizing. Here's one potential solution for small bedrooms that are adjacent to each other, and that is a mini duct where you run, you put an air handler in the attic above or the basement below, and you run tiny little duct work, 3 foot, maybe 6 foot duct work to reach into each room over a wall partition. And in this illustration, you've got 12,000 BTUs that split between the two. So they're perfect. They're getting 6,000 and they're happy as can be, and you're comfortable as can be. Now these two could be connected to 2 separate condensers or to 1 condenser. Generally, a condenser will work most efficiently when it has fewer heads on it, but you can put up to 4 or so heads per condenser, and the heads can be up to 150 feet from the condenser. So yeah, it's an option to do it either way. In your next step on your heat pump research, we highly recommend the no-cost virtual independent consultations that you can book with Mass Save, with Energy Sage. And if you have one of these municipal power companies, they also offer independent virtual consultations. We do recommend that you get 3 quotes. I know this does require some extra time, but you're talking about spending, potentially tens of thousands of dollars. And the heat pump configurations are so varied. You could really have, people telling you, recommending highly different designs. So you want to dive in and really try to learn what these contractors are talking about, engage with them and then weigh. And the nice thing is that both Mass Save and Energy Sage, and I believe these municipal power companies, will all offer quote comparisons as well. You can give them 3 bids that you've received, and they'll give you an independent feedback about, oh, this one's got higher efficiency equipment. That's why it's more expensive. Your operating costs are actually going to be lower than this other contractor who looks like they're lower, but your operating costs are going to be higher. Things like that that are really useful. Questions to ask installers. Number 1, is your company one of the approved installers in my state or my municipality for the heat pump rebate program? In Mass Save territory, you have to use one of the approved installers, or you're not going to get the rebate. And ask them about the heat load calculation that they're using to design your system. Have they formally calculated that? That's called a manual J. Any HVAC technician knows how to do this. It does take some time, but you want to know, did they formally calculate it, or did they estimate it? And you want to feel confident that they've given you a good number. And of course, if you get 3 quotes, and one of them says you need much more heat than the others do, you want to try to understand, or if they say you need much less, you want to understand why. And finally, is the equipment that you're recommending eligible for the state or municipal rebate? You don't want them selling you a piece of equipment that's not cold climate rated, and there are very specific lists. You can get the model number, and you can look up that model number, and you can find out if it's on the list or not. So just in closing, we do have lots of upcoming events. Tomorrow there'll be a Rhode Island heat pump incentive webinar. In mid-November, there's going to be a more EV rebate for electric cars webinar. As I said, lots of different webinars all the time, and you can find those on our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/events. We are a nonprofit. We welcome your donations, and we do a lot of advocacy work both in both states, and this really creates conditions that make it possible for you to make the right choices and still make the right economic choices. So I'm happy to take your questions now. Kate can start off reading some questions, and you can also send those to me, or you can leave a message for me at that phone number. So Kate, do you want to go ahead and start some questions?
Sure. Let's see. I heat my house with hot water. Can hot water heater replace my furnace? Which I know you've touched on.
Right. So yes, theoretically, you can find air to water heat pumps, but you're going to be more of a pioneer for that. And you probably want to wait at least until the new year to start gathering quotes, because in 2025, the refrigerant law changes, and they'll be rolling out some new pieces of equipment with different refrigerants, and yeah, so yes, technically it can, but it's going to be a slog. It's going to take some real research, and most people who currently heat with hot water, if they want to switch to heat pumps now, will be using a Ductless option for their heat pump.
Is there a spreadsheet that you use that compares costs for kilowatt hours, gas therms, gallons of oil and BTUs to get a cost comparison, then further comparisons based upon efficiency ratings?
Yes, I do have a spreadsheet. It's a proprietary one that's been given to me by a vendor, so I can't share it with you, unfortunately. But when you go through the Mass Save program or the municipal advising or Energy Sage, they can also take a look at those things. Certainly the Mass Save program has access to that same spreadsheet that I'm using, similar, and can answer your questions about operating costs specific to your home.
And I believe you addressed this a bit too. Julie was informed by an installer that coolant is going to change in the next year to an improved version. Is there a good reason to wait for this? And then they also asked that they heard Massachusetts was getting a federal influx of money for conversion to heat pumps. Will that drive down the cost in the near future?
The federal money cost. The refrigerant, yes. So starting January 1, there is will be new regulations on the manufacturers of heat pumps about what refrigerants they can use. They're still allowed to sell all the equipment that they've already manufactured, but they can't manufacture new equipment with the older refrigerants. So you will see some new models coming on. And these are going to be better, you know, for solving climate change and stopping global warming, because the refrigerants themselves, some of them have a high, if they leak, and you want to, you know, guard against leaks by hiring the highest quality team that you can. If they leak, some of the refrigerants have a very high global warming potential, is the term that we use, global warming potential. And those are the ones that are being outlawed starting January 1. So this is a good change that's happening. And there's no need to rush out and buy up the old ones. The new ones will work just as well. Now, the influx of federal money, there are actually lots of streams of federal money that are coming in, and they're designed to stimulate adoption of heat pumps, but also production of heat pumps. Whether that federal money will lower the cost is kind of a long-term gain, a long-term game to play, a long-term bet to make. Definitely when the her and here IRA rebates become available in Massachusetts, that will lower your net cost if you participate in either of those programs, the one for all incomes or the one for low and moderate incomes. So if you got quotes for a project and you looked at those long-term costs and the short-term costs and you're like, oh, this is really kind of questionable, then yes, as soon as you hear that the federal rebate through the Inflation Reduction Act has launched in Massachusetts, it is good and wise to go back and redo those numbers and see if that makes the difference for you. If you've already done the costs and you've figured, you know, I can actually make this swing, I can afford this change now, then it might not be worth waiting for those federal rebates to come. Number one, they really don't add up to a big chunk of change for consumers at the consumer level, compared to the funds that are already available through Mass Save. The Mass Save rebates are so great that the federal money isn't going to make a huge difference in Massachusetts. Someplace like, I don't know, Louisiana, someplace where there are not great incentives already in place through the state energy efficiency program or through the utility program, then those federal rebates may make a huge difference. But in Massachusetts, we have such a robust incentive program already. If you can afford to go forward, I suggest that you go ahead and do that and not wait for the news about the IRA rebates.
If a heat pump works to -10 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, why are there systems that switch from heat pump to a fossil fuel system when the temperature drops below 30 degrees?
This is primarily because of the low cost of natural gas. You know, globally, we have not recognized the environmental costs inherent in the burning of all fossil fuels, but in particularly in the case of gas, it's been seen as a clean fuel, but it doesn't take into account all the global warming that happens as a result of the production of the gas from the wellhead through the transmission through our streets. All the leaks that are happening add up, and those costs are not borne by the final consumer in the amount that they pay on their gas bill. It's borne by all of us in terms of the health and climate impacts, et cetera. So natural gas, the cost of natural gas is very low. And when you get down to those colder temperatures and the efficiency of the heat pump, say it's working at 400% and it drops to 200%, and then it drops to 1.5% or 125%, then the cost of natural gas, even though the natural gas is only working at 98% efficient, it's still lower at that lower temperature than the electricity that's needed to operate the heat pump. So that's why there are more partial systems, or why some people persist in wanting to have a partial system.
With income-based incentives for a building with renters, is the incentive based on the building owner income level or the renters?
Generally, it's based on the renters. For the tax credit, most the most common tax credit is based on the owner's income. There may be in the future some federal incentives, like for instance, the HER and HERE incentives would most likely be based on the occupant's income. But in general, all the mass save rebates are based on the occupant's income, not the owners.
Claire mentions that she has hot air vents, and you mentioned that with vents, it is best to keep using those. One reason that she wants to switch is air quality, as the forced air has caused some respiratory issues for family. If she has vents, is it vastly more work to completely switch and not use the vents anymore? Is there a way to do that where it makes sense?
Oh, yeah. You can definitely switch to a ductless system. If you currently have a furnace with hot air ducts, you can have those completely removed. The furnace carted away, the ductwork taken, the vents boarded over, et cetera. That's all a real possibility as well. Obviously, there would be some costs involved in doing that. But yeah, ductless is totally an option for people who have furnaces now. The air quality issues could potentially be addressed with the heat pump air handler in the basement, because again, it's filtering the air there before it sends it through the ducts. But if the ducts themselves are suspect as an air quality issue, then yes, you can take the ducts out as well. I certainly know somebody who's just doing that today, in fact, having all their ducts removed. So not a problem to do it that way.
What are the main reasons that people are converting to heat pumps? If you have an efficient oil system, why change anything since the cost is so high?
The main reason that people are changing is environmental, or the need to add air conditioning. As the summers get warmer due to climate change, etc., more and more people are wanting air conditioning, and heat pumps offer that option. But yes, if you have efficient gas equipment now, even if you have efficient oil equipment now, there's no reason why it wouldn't be wise to wait until that equipment is at its end of life, or, at least has gone, 10 years, so that you've gotten, your investment back in terms of the quality of the equipment that you purchased. And just planning to change over. Remember the Inflation Reduction Act, that 2000 tax credit and any of the rebates that are associated is going to go for the next 10 years. So it's fine to do a long-term plan and to continue burning your fossil fuel equipment at present, if it's the smarter economic decision for your household. The Mass Clean Energy Center does have a nice checklist for decarbonization planning. So it lists all the different fossil fuel uses in your home, your kitchen, your driving, your hot water, et cetera, and you can note the anticipated year that those equipments will need to be replaced, and start scheduling, if you will, doing a 10-year schedule of when would it make sense to switch over these various pieces of equipment.
Looks like we have time for just a few more. Can you speak to the longevity that can be expected from the units, and what is the maintenance required? Any idea of costs associated? I've heard that a lot of folks are qualified to install, but finding people to service and maintain drops off. I don't know if that's true.
All right. Let me take this in reverse order because I'm not sure exactly if I'll remember them all. But the maintenance question I do want to address. Maintenance costs for heat pumps are likely to be less than for an oil furnace, where you want to, have an annual tune-up. It might be more than you have for your gas furnace if you don't do an annual cleaning for your gas furnace, then the maintenance cost for your heat pump might be slightly more. But there's actually relatively little that needs to be done to maintain a heat pump. So a lot of people don't do an annual maintenance visit for their heat pump either. The thing you do need to do with a heat pump is if you have the heads, there's a filter that the consumer has to clean that filter. You can easily open the unit, you can run a vacuum across it, you can slide it out, you can run it in soapy hot water, you can let air dry, and when it's completely dry, you slide it back in. You do this on a seasonal basis is usually adequate, depending on how many cats and smokers, et cetera, that you have in the house. So that's the consumer maintenance task that you need to be able to do. And generally you don't hire that out because it's just a small task. It's like changing the furnace filter. If you have a furnace, you change that usually yourself. Now, in terms of professional maintenance, there really isn't professional maintenance that's needed unless there's a problem. And if you have a sudden loss of heating capacity or cooling capacity, you'll know it. You'll be able to tell it's not delivering, and you would need to call the technician for that. You can get a maintenance plan for this. That might be $150 a year, might be $300 a year, depending on the company. And most HVAC companies will be able to give you a contract. If they install heat pumps, they'll be able to give you a contract to do maintenance for it. So it won't be difficult to find someone who does maintenance on a heat pump. Now, that one caveat is just like a refrigerator, just like an air conditioner, there is a possibility that because you're running a very cold refrigerant in a warm room, so you're constantly having warm air coming up against a cold refrigerant line, there's going to be condensation at that nexus of the cold and the hot. And if that moisture builds up in there, you could have mold. And you can get a technician to come in and give you a thorough mold cleaning. And again, it's not going to be that expensive, $300, something like that. And it's something that can be done in a couple of hours. You can avoid that completely with this one tip, and that is in the summer, when you get a nice day and you don't need to run your air conditioner, instead of turning the heat pump off, you turn it to fan only. So it's no longer cooling. The refrigerant that's sitting there in that box is coming up to room temperature. It's no longer being actively cooled. It's just running a little fan to move air through it. And that moving air is drying out all the little parts in that head. And once you've run that fan for a while and the unit is completely dry, then you can turn it off. But that will avoid the whole mold problem. So I highly recommend in the summer when you have a heat pump, if you're turning it off, turn it to fan instead of off. And what was the other part of that question?
Longevity.
I'm not hearing you, Kate. Can you speak louder?
The longevity of the heat pump.
Oh, yeah. It's similar to a furnace. 12 years, something along that line. A boiler will last longer generally, but newer boilers have a shorter lifespan than older boilers used to, because they're no longer made with, a ton of steel. So, yeah.
And we're a little over time, so we'll take one more. And as Loie mentioned, you can email Loie at greenenergyconsumers.org with additional questions. There's more information on our website listed on the screen, and we will send out a follow-up email with the slides and the recording of this presentation. So last but not least, my indoor unit is mounted near the ceiling and has trouble warming the air close to the floor. I have to use a Vornado fan on the floor to blow colder air toward the ceiling to try to equalize the air temperature. Would a floor-mounted indoor unit shown in one of the slides solve this stratification problem? Any other tips I could try?
Stratification is usually not a problem with heat pumps, but I hear you that it can be. There are multiple settings on the fans and the louvers, so you could potentially set the louver to go up and down to move the air around a little bit more. You could also, point them straight down if that seems to be a problem. And also don't feel shy about increasing setting the thermostat at a higher temperature. Generally with our older boilers and furnaces, you know, we knew 68 or 69 or 70 or whatever it was going to keep us comfortable. But with a heat pump, because it's a different technology, a different method of distributing heat, you may find that you need to have it at 60, you know, at 71 or 73 to, you know, adequately move the air around. You can also control the speed of the fan. So you might try controlling the speed of the fan. Um, yeah, so generally we don't have that problem of stratification, you know, with the ceiling mounted units. But yes, you are correct that a floor mounted unit would distribute the heat first down, and it would naturally rise. So floor mounted units would be theoretically less likely to produce stratification during the winter. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for attending. And as Kate said, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to these to the recording and to the slides that I've presented. And I am happy to, as well as some links to, you know, various things. And I'm happy to take your questions afterwards. Thanks so much for coming.